In June of 2022, Cedar Fair announced that they had sold the land under California's Great America, and the park is slated to close permanently sometime in the coming years. As this deadline looms, many people have speculated about where the park's rides may be relocated to. And while many are focused on the standout rides like Railblazer and Gold Striker, I want to talk about Tiki Twirl. On the surface, Tiki Twirl is an extremely common disco flat ride that you can find at regional parks around the world. But in a past life, it was one of the strangest cases of ride theming anywhere. When the ride opened in 2006, it wasn't called Tiki Twirl. It was Survivor the Ride. The ride claimed to bring the experience of the hit reality show to park guests, and Paramount Parks had high expectations for it. But the ride wasn't a result of careful development, and instead it was stuck at a crossroads for the park, the show, and the regional amusement park model as a whole. And as a result, it missed the mark. California's Great America was born out of jealousy. The Marriott Hotel Corporation was desperate to take advantage of the tourism boom that America was undergoing in the early 1970s. This boom was led by Disneyland and Walt Disney World pioneering the destination theme park and reinventing domestic travel. This was compounded by the effects of America's bicentennial on the horizon, which increased patriotism and interest in Americans traveling to as many corners of the country as possible. Marriott saw this as a clear opportunity that made sense for their growing hotel empire. If people come to visit a new amusement park, they're likely going to need to stay at a hotel. So with that, they began constructing two sister amusement parks, both named Marriott's Great America, one of them being in Illinois and the other being in Santa Clara, California.
It's the country of fun for everyone. It's Marriott's Great America. The rides are great, the shows are great, the fun is great at Marriott's Great America. Discover Marriott's Great America.
You haven't seen America till you've seen Marriott's Great America.
The California park would open first on March 20th, 1976, followed by the Illinois park in May. In the years after opening, the Great America parks were successful, but mainly with locals. The parks failed to bring in the tourists that Marriott expected, and because of that, they didn't bring in the hotel guests they expected either. They were uncomfortable having these parks in their portfolio without a direct connection to their main business, and it was a risky investment that they just weren't interested in. So by 1983, Marriott was looking to sell, and in 1985, the city of Santa Clara ended up taking control of the park. The city then brought in an outside company to run the park in King's Entertainment Company, who were also finding success with Kings Island out in Ohio. Eventually, the city would just end up outright selling the park to King's Entertainment Company, and they would keep the park a hit with the community.
It's been just 5 years since the Walt Disney Company was taken over by a new management team. Now, as a result, Mickey Mouse not only has a star on Hollywood Boulevard, he's also a star on Wall Street. His corporate masters have made the Disney Company an international purveyor of what's been called a unique synthetic experience.
As the 90s ushered in the Disney decade, it was becoming clear that Disney found a synergy formula that was turning them into a powerhouse. This drew the envy of basically every other movie studio. If Disney could turn their movies into merchandise and rides, what would stop someone else from taking that formula? For Paramount Pictures especially, this hit close to home as the man at the helm of Disney was on their payroll just a few years prior. This jealousy grew, and they were looking for a quick way to leverage their movies and shows into theme parks and recreate that Disney magic. In 1992, an opportunity would present itself for Paramount. They were able to purchase the King's Entertainment Company outright for $400 million, which is nearly $1 billion today. This gave them control of 5 parks in North America, including what was now known as Paramount's Great America. Paramount saw Great America as a potential competitor, or at least an alternative to the ever-growing competition in the state. On the southern side of the coast, parks like Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, Magic Mountain, and Universal Studios were all becoming these major destinations for people to travel to. Which, speaking of, I actually just plan to visit out to some of those parks next year, and that's partially thanks to this video sponsor, Built. Built is a loyalty program that actually rewards you for paying your rent every month, and I've been using them to pay my rent for over a year now. It's something I wish I knew about sooner because I was paying rent for way too long and not getting any rewards for it. But I just was able to put the points I've earned in the past year towards my hotel stay out in California, and it could not have been easier. If you want to get started with Built, just sign up through the link in my description or the QR code on screen. Then when you pay your rent through Built, you earn Built points that can be put towards things like flights, hotels, fitness classes, and even your next rent payment. There's no cost to join, and you can start earning rewards on rent no matter where you live. Built points have actually been ranked the highest value point currency by the points guy, so the rewards add up quick. To me though, the best part about Built is that it took something I was already doing every month in paying rent and turned it into an opportunity to earn points and get rewarded. So if you want to join, you can use the QR code on the screen or the link in the description, and using either of these lets them know that I sent you and helps support me and the channel. So thank you, Built, for sponsoring this video and helping me visit some of the incredible theme parks in California. To compete with these powerhouse neighbors, Paramount went in and themed many of the existing rides at their parks to various Paramount and shortly thereafter through an acquisition, Viacom properties. This included rides themed to Top Gun, Rugrats, and Dora the Explorer. These overlays weren't super involved and for the most part were just putting the name on the ride and playing the score in the queue. But once Paramount had gotten their feet wet in the industry, they wanted to take a big swing and build a highly themed ride based off their newest franchise, Tomb Raider. In 2002, they would invest $20 million into Tomb Raider the Ride at Kings Island. And even though the ride itself is remembered fondly, it never got close to giving them a return on investment and quickly became a problem child for the company. Paramount was burned by Tomb Raider the Ride, but they still wanted to give Great America a ground-up ride themed to something that would bring in the crowds. They needed to find something that wouldn't require a ton of money to theme well, and was a hit with audiences for years by this point. This led Paramount to look towards a show that pioneered an entire genre and hadn't found its way into theme parks just yet.
On Wednesday, May 31st,
Let's do it!
we're stranding 16 real people on a remote island
They've been given 2 minutes to salvage whatever they can off this boat.
without food, electricity, or comforts of any kind.
I'm not eating no rats till I get hungry.
They'll compete for $1 million and once a week vote to see who stays and who goes. Survivor is the wildest show in history. The adventure of a lifetime comes to CBS beginning Wednesday, May 31st.
Survivor premiered to audiences in the summer of 2000 and instantly captivated the world. The premise of the show was simple. 16 average Americans were stranded on an island and divided into 2 tribes. Every few days they would compete against each other for immunity, and the losers would go to tribal council and vote off a member of their own tribe. All of this while trying to survive on the island and being filmed constantly. The show pioneered the reality TV competition format and would be responsible for countless other shows in a similar vein. Americans couldn't get enough of watching this social strategic competition and the moral implications that came with it. Nielsen estimated that 125 million people watched at least some part of the first season's finale, and that's 44% of the country's population at the time. So, safe to say, the show was a phenomenon, and it would air 2 seasons every year following, maintaining high ratings. By the time Paramount Parks was looking towards Survivor for Great America, the show was just coming off the high of its first All-Star season in 2004. The timing could not have been more perfect. Before we jump too far into the development of the ride, I just want to mention the Ace interview with David Cobb that provided so much of the information in this section. Without it, this video would not have been nearly as complete. And so I'm going to link that whole thing in the description, and I do really highly recommend reading it if you find this video interesting. At the beginning of development, the creative team wasn't really thinking ride. They were looking more so at other ways to integrate Survivor into the park. They had ideas for stage shows, meet and greets, and restaurants. But unfortunately, upper management was dead set on a Survivor ride. So this brought them to the relatively new Zamperla Disco Coaster ride. While not a roller coaster in a traditional sense, it was a family-friendly flat ride with a bit of thrills. The ride would move guests back and forth over a track, while the gondola carrying guests would rotate with them facing outwards. This was an easy-to-acquire off-the-shelf ride that was a lot cheaper than anything custom. Then the team looked at locations in the park where this ride could fit, and what they noticed is that it would fit pretty nicely over the existing Rapids ride. And this was exciting, as it gave them the idea of retheming that ride as well to create essentially a Survivor mini-land with this fun interaction between the 2 rides. However, as the project progressed, complications with building on that land and integrating the 2 rides, not to mention the cost of it, forced them to find a different location for the ride. This scaled back the concept and placed it right next to the Grizzly. Less than a year after development started, the ride was being built, and it was slated for a 2006 opening. On May 14, 2006, Survivor the Ride opened to the public, with Survivor alumni and fans in the crowd ready to be some of the first to experience the new ride. As guests entered the queue, they were greeted by a series of banners, one for each season of Survivor, including the 12th season Panama, whose finale was actually airing that same night. On each banner was the cast photo as well as the tribe names. Also in the queue were screens playing the intros to each season of the show, intercut with clips of Season 3 winner Ethan and Season 6 winner Jenna, who were actually dating at the time, giving the safety spiel for the ride and explaining that at the end of the queue, guests would be split into 4 different tribes.
Do you have what it takes to be a survivor? Here's your first challenge. Just up the pathway, you'll be assigned into a survivor tribe.
When you reach the challenge platform further down the path, your tribe will be divided into 4 groups: orange, blue, purple, and green.
At the loading platform, or as the ride called it, the challenge platform, Jenna and Ethan would instruct guests to stand on their assigned tribe color. They then went over the basic idea of the ride. The louder your tribe completed the tribal chant you were taught, the wetter the other tribes would get on the ride.
Next to the ride track are 8 giant ceremonial tribal masks. They're hiding a wet surprise for the other tribe.
Stomping of your feet, clapping of your hands, and loud chanting in time with the jungle drum rhythm will be picked up by the sensors in the platform.
Like Ethan said, the louder you are, the more water gets drenched on the other tribe.
As the ride started in front of them, the tribal chant began. Guests were taught this chant in the queue and were encouraged to loudly stomp in rhythm with a drum beat. This progressed a map on the screens where at various checkpoints, tribal masks around the ride would spray water.
Keep stomping, make it happen, let's get them wet. Oh yeah, nice.
Now add the hand clap.
After guests succeeded through the first checkpoint, hand claps were added into the chant. However, they would end up failing the second checkpoint every time.
Oh, not quite enough.
Try adding the chant.
This led to the final stage where you were encouraged to chant the names of Jenna and Ethan's original tribe names.
My original tribe name was Jabiru.
My original tribe name was Baran.
You mean boring. I'll say Jabiru.
Then I'll say Baran. Then you answer, huh, huh. Let's try.
Jabiru.
Baran.
Huh, huh. Jabiru.
Baran. Huh, huh.
This was a success, and torches ignited around the ride.
Woohoo!
Sweet, you did it.
You won the most important reward in the game of Survivor.
Fire! Great job, survivors.
Congratulations, survivors.
This finished the chant and the challenge platform. Guests were then loaded onto the ride vehicle itself in their tribe section. And once they were loaded in, the ride was basically a standard Zamperla disco, just with some tiki theming. The Survivor theming was mostly absent from the actual ride portion of the experience, aside from just the general motifs of the show. Once the ride cycle completed, guests unloaded and would pass by a photo op reminiscent of the classic Hands on a Heart Idol challenge. This was probably the most forward-thinking part of the ride. This was in the very early days of social media and cell phones with cameras, so having this super shareable photo op was really ahead of its time, but I'm not sure that can be said for the rest of the experience. While the ride got considerable press and hype prior to its opening, once it opened, it was clear that the ride didn't live up to people's imaginations. Many people expected a full Survivor experience, but what they got was 2 former winners in a video and stickers on a stock flat ride. While the chant idea was unique, it wasn't really Survivor in any way. It was just built off the island motif that Survivor also leveraged. The theming was done at a regional park level, which obviously makes sense as this was a regional park, but it was utilizing this massive brand that was a worldwide phenomenon. These 2 things just didn't work to create something that people thought was worthy of the hype. However, even as the Survivor aspects of the ride were considered a miss, the actual ride itself was liked by a lot of people. This was similar to the reception that the disco model was getting around the world as it was installed at more and more parks. Seeing that the biggest success of their Survivor-themed ride was the part they put the least theming into put the final nail in the coffin for Paramount Parks trying to plus up their stock rides with movie and TV shows.
In society, status depends on clothes, cars, where we live, and our ethnic background. But what happens when civilization is stripped away? And status depends on catching fish, making fire, and living with people you never expected.
20 people divided into 4 ethnic groups. A social experiment like we've never done before.
We all feel the pressure to represent.
Coincidentally, Survivor was beginning to ramp up preseason promotion for the next iteration of the show in Cook Islands. In an attempt to draw in more viewers, the show implemented a controversial casting twist, which almost immediately resulted in fierce public backlash and the loss of many major corporate sponsors of the show. This kicked off a slump for the show, and its cultural relevancy dropped to a point that I'd argue it stayed around until very recently. At the same time, there was this sense that the show may end at some point soon, and CBS even commissioned a new show called Pirate Master in the same style, just to see if that new show could capture the ratings of early Survivor. All of this didn't really help the brand new ride bearing the show's name. What also didn't help the new ride was that just a year prior to opening, the parent company of Paramount Parks, Viacom, split into two separate corporations. Paramount Parks found themselves under the CBS Corporation side of the split, and pretty much immediately it was clear that they didn't really want these parks. The leadership of the new company saw these parks as an unnecessary venture and risk for them. So by 2006, they were publicly looking for a buyer for the Paramount Parks chain. Then, just a few months after Survivor the Ride opened, Cedar Fair would purchase the chain. While they were given the option to extend the Viacom brand licenses, they chose not to take it and began removing the theming from the rides. A majority of this work was done by 2007, with just the Nickelodeon brands remaining until 2010, and then there was Survivor the Ride. Now, this is speculation, but I think there's a good chance that Survivor fell under a different licensing deal than the rest of the rides, especially since its development and opening was happening during the split and the negotiations for the sale. But even if the licensing deal was its own thing, there probably was an expiration date on it. By 2011, Survivor the Ride was this weird relic of a different time for California's Great America. While there's nothing official out there, it seems like the licensing deal was coming up after 5 years. By this point, Survivor had stayed this niche show as reality television became this massively oversaturated market, and it was no longer the cultural powerhouse that had a chance of drawing tourists to the park. At this point, Cedar Fair had been applying their own strategy to the parks, and it didn't include third-party licensing deals. Their focus was on adding major coaster investments into key parks in their portfolio with minimal theming. After the 2011 season ended, the park quietly began removing the Survivor theming from the ride. There wasn't really a major announcement leading up to this or any coverage of it, as most people were focused on the other removal from the park that off-season, in the rare inverted boomerang in Vertigo. When guests returned to the park for the 2012 season, they walked in to find Survivor the Ride was still there, but rethemed to Tiki Twirl. The ride looked very similar still, and it retained the tribal masks, jungle theming, and divided load platform. In the queue, the season banners were replaced with banners highlighting tiki gods that Cedar Fair invented, and the TV screens now displayed generic park information. The load platform no longer had any interactive element, and was simply a way to separate guests into easy-to-load groups. To most guests, Tiki Twirl was essentially the same as Survivor the Ride to them. While some guests liked the Survivor touches throughout and got into the cheesy chant, a majority of them were just there to ride the ride and ignored everything else. Guest participation in rides is a really tricky thing to do right, and Survivor the Ride relied on tired amusement park guests to want to pretend that them chanting actually did anything to affect the ride, and find it worth the risk of embarrassing themselves in front of their friends. This isn't a place like Disney where people want to make believe. People visit regional theme parks for the rides. So with that in mind, Tiki Twirl gave guests what they wanted, and it operates to this day. The ride in this form is a favorite with families, and probably most guests don't even realize the ride has a history beyond Tiki Twirl. I think the industry as a whole actually learned some lessons from Survivor the Ride. It came at the tail end of regional parks trying to bring in major entertainment properties to theme their rides to on a shoestring budget. Parks were trying to reverse engineer the Disney model, and they soon realized that that wasn't something that could be done for cheap. Rides like Survivor really wore off the allure of becoming a regional Disney or Universal, and it caused parks to look back at investing in what made them successful originally, thrills for a reasonable price. But I think it also showed that not everything needs to be a theme park ride. No matter the budget, Survivor just doesn't translate to a ride. It doesn't have a consistent narrative with characters easily recognizable to the average theme park guest. Survivor at its core is constantly evolving, and a ride is frozen in time. Now, had Paramount put more trust in their creatives and moved forward with a guest participation stage show, I think it would have been far more popular with guests and not forgotten to time. Think of Fear Factor Live at Universal Studios, which opened just a year before Survivor the Ride. That show was essentially a condensed and scaled down version of the one guests watched on TV. It was easy for guests to understand and drew in fans of the show who had watched and said, I could do that. The show was so successful in its theme park format that it lasted until 2020 in Orlando, even though the original run of the TV show ended in 2006. If this show could outlast its inspiration by 14 years, imagine the success of a Survivor version considering that show is still going strong today. Survivor the Ride existed at a crossroads for regional theme parks. They'd found themselves in a race to become the next Disney and Universal, but without the backing of a massive media conglomerate. Paramount Parks tried to solve this, but corporate chess got in their way of ever fully realizing their acquisition. The realization that recreating Disney and Universal's formula was not as easy as it seemed set in. At the same time, the ride was weathering the storm of a show whose longevity was in question. Even though fans of it look back at this era a lot more fondly now, at the time, the show was losing its cultural footing and potentially looking at the end of its run. Ironically, the next era for the show that coincided with the closure of the ride is now seen as the low point for the franchise. Then, all this was compounded by the shift in ownership during and right after the ride's development. It's difficult to develop a ride with a company who has one foot out the door, and it's even harder to promote a new ride with a new owner who never wanted it in the first place. The timing of the Viacom split and Cedar Fair sale just couldn't have been worse. The ride couldn't catch a break, and because of that, it suffered from a restrained budget and a lack of clear vision. Survivor the Ride aimed higher than most Paramount Park ride integrations, and it still missed the mark. It tried to find a way to make guests feel like they were part of the show before the ride started, but it bit off more than it could chew. Survivor wasn't something that could translate well to a ride. The budget wasn't there, the ride itself wasn't a part of the story, and corporate chaos stifled better ideas on the table. After its rebranding to Tiki Twirl in 2012, the memories of Survivor the Ride have been almost entirely lost to time. When I was talking about making this video with friends, not a single one of them knew about this ride's existence, even those who are theme park and Survivor fans. The ride never left a legacy or an impact, but I think now that California's Great America is on borrowed time, it's interesting to look back at this weird ride that came from one of the most chaotic times in the park's history. And unless Tiki Twirl gets relocated, we may be looking at the end of the line for Survivor the Ride. But maybe it's time someone goes back to the well of bringing a competition reality show to theme park guests in a unique way. Over in Australia, Dreamworld actually just announced they built a new Big Brother house in the park. This allows them to draw in guests to be in the live eviction audiences. So instead of making a version of the show that guests could take part in, Dreamworld found a way for guests to be able to see the real thing. If something like this can be successful, maybe something like Survivor the show would be a smash hit with park guests. Or maybe it wouldn't, given that Six Flags actually did try a Survivor stage show in some of their parks from 2009 to 2011. Maybe it has less to do with the actual experience itself and more to do with the type of guests that are visiting each park. At a Six Flags, people aren't going in expecting to spend time at a stage show. Whereas at Universal or Disney, people are planning shows into their park day. Maybe the tribe has spoken for Survivor in theme parks. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you couldn't tell, I'm a big reality TV and Survivor fan, to the point where there's actually been a Survivor 47 merge buff in the background for like a ton of videos now. So this was a really fun video for me to make. I also want to thank Built again for sponsoring this video. If you're interested in learning more about them, the link's in the description, and using that link really helps support me in the channel, and genuinely, it means a ton, and I super appreciate it. But otherwise, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.
Got nothing for you. Get on out of here.